Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, Em and Jay, and today the two of us are talking about what we would like to see in Season 2 of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Season 2 is coming in April, and they've already started promoting it, and we also reviewed every episode of Season 1, and we're planning on doing the same with Season 2. And while Season 1 had interesting concepts and some good moments, overall it didn't really impress us, but we're curious to see where it goes. So this video is just gonna be us discussing what we would like to see in Season 2, along with reflecting on Season 1. Some of these things we might actually get, and some of them, I don't know. We'll see. These aren't going to be in any particular order, so we're just gonna start with world building. Season 1 had a lot of opportunity for world building, but a lot of it ended up getting shoved into episode 12. And unfortunately, we didn't get answers to some really big questions, like, what is Grayskull? It's a little weird that Adora has to call on the honor of Grayskull in order to activate her She-Ra transformation, but she doesn't actually know what Grayskull is. She doesn't know Grayskull's a good thing. My theory is that the Eternians were the first ones, and that Grayskull was a part of that. I don't know if they brought the castle with them, or if it's back on Eternia, but I suppose it's a possibility. That would explain why the Crystal Castle's password is Eternia. I know they said that they aren't going to bring in He-Man or any of the characters from his show, so I guess they're going to have to recontextualize what Grayskull is, considering the fact that the sorceress doesn't even live there. But still, we really should know the context of this. Another thing that I'd really like to see when it comes to world building is really being able to explore the kingdoms and the world itself. What do we really know about Bright Moon, even? We spend a lot of time there, but all we ever get to see is the castle. We don't really know much about its history or its culture and its people. Most of what we know about these different kingdoms is that one's the Sea Kingdom, and that's the Ice Kingdom, and that's the Hippie Kingdom, but we don't really get a deeper look into these places. This show gets compared to Avatar: The Last Airbender a lot, and it's understandable with all the different elements, but we really got to see a lot more of the world in Avatar. We even got to see different locations within the same kingdom, like Omashu and Ba Sing Se in the Earth Kingdom, and the different air temples, along with the history of these unique places like Kyoshi Island. It really helped to make the world of Avatar feel more alive, and like people actually lived there. Etheria doesn't really get the same level of detail, and it makes the world feel very empty. Also, half the time, these places aren't very populated to begin with, so that doesn't exactly help. There was a story explanation for why Selenius was empty, but honestly, a lot of other places feel just as empty. It would be nice to get to know the people of Bright Moon more too. What's their opinion of their queen and their princess? They seem to openly argue a lot in front of everybody, so it'd be interesting to hear their take on that. It'd also be nice to hear their take on the war and if they're optimistic about it, or how they're feeling in general after their kingdom was invaded by the Horde. It would really help to breathe some life into Etheria, which right now feels very lifeless and empty. It would also be nice to see Madame Raz again. She could be a key to more world building, along with learning more about Mara and also the other previous She-Ras. Maybe there was even another previous She-Ra called Adora who had a twin brother named Adam. Just throwing that out there. Could be interesting. The show could benefit from more action. This is an action show since the last episode was almost entirely the invasion of Bright Moon, so having more action throughout the season could help to build up to that. Plus, we could see more of what these characters can do. A lot of the fight scenes we do have are pretty short, and there's not a lot of choreography. Most of it's just throwing punches, so it'd be nice to see them mix it up a little bit more. We'd also like to see more character development. There's a pretty big cast right now, and Catra's the only character that got any significant development, and I think that's why she ended up being a fan favorite for a lot of people. It would be nice to see other characters have the same attention brought to them. We got introduced to a lot of characters this season, and we'll probably be introduced to more characters next season. I don't know if they should bring in more characters until the characters we do have get more development. Even Adora, who's supposed to be the main character, doesn't get the same amount of attention, and it results in her not being fleshed out the way she needs to be. Adora made her choice to leave the Horde and be She-Ra, but after that she doesn't get to make a lot of other other choices. She's just kind of pushed along by the plot. There were even times where it felt like she just asked for things to happen, and then those things happened. Like episode 10, when she was lost in the woods. She practically gives up, and then the Crystal Castle just revealed itself to her. I think this was supposed to be a character development moment, but it didn't come off that way. Most of the time, she's running around asking other people what to do, or stressing and blaming herself for something that isn't actually her fault. She could really use more agency, so she can take charge of her own story. Glimmer is another character that it felt like they were trying to give her development, but a lot of the time she ended up regressing again. She spent the whole season arguing with her mother, and then finally in episode 10 they had this moment and it felt like, okay, now she can start to move forward. But then in episode 12, she wanted to go right back to doing everything that she had been doing already. She spent most of season 1 fighting with her mother, going behind her back and demanding to be put in a position of power and responsibility when she's pretty obviously not ready for it. She's not very mature and she doesn't want to take responsibility. It's like she wants the recognition more than anything else. Then in episode 10, she's forced to face all of that, and she and her mother have a moment, and it looks like she's finally getting some development and she can start to move forward and mature. But then in episode 12, she wants to go right back to her old ways, going behind her mother's back. Queen Angela actually develops and accepts Glimmer as a strong, capable leader, even though it didn't feel like Glimmer proved that. She messes up in episode 8, and then she spends most of episode 10 trying to hide all of that from her mother, but then she's forced to confront it, and Queen Angela just tells her it'll be okay, basically. Glimmer isn't forced to take responsibility for what happened, because Queen Angela is just hugging her and telling her it'll be alright. Maybe that's why her development doesn't stick for her. Then there's Bo. I really hope that we get to see him stick up for himself more, because in the first season, he's kind of like that friend that just gets pushed around by everybody else. I'd also like to learn more about his history, like maybe how he and Glimmer became friends, because it seems like for a long time it was just the two of them before Adora came into the picture. And if they do have this history of friendship, why does Glimmer treat him so badly? He's shown to be a pretty good friend, maybe a little too much even. He picks up after her and cleans up her room when she's throwing a temper tantrum. There are times where she'll pick something up and then just throw it on the ground, and then he picks up after her. But then she treats him so poorly, and then she's very possessive of him. This is a really weird friendship, and it's a little weird how they call themselves the best friend squad, and the show acts like they're such good friends, but then they're not shown to be good friends. We don't even know why they're friends. They just kind of are, and they've been that way for a long time. So seeing their relationship fleshed out more would be really great. I also wonder why Bo was so accepting of Adora back in the first 2 episodes, but was very dismissive of others like Kyle, Natasa, and Spinnerella. Adora works for the Horde, so he had no reason to trust her, but ultimately he was very personable towards her, and it was Glimmer who was openly suspicious and hostile towards her. Kyle also works for the Horde, but he was openly trying to make a connection with Bo. He was almost desperate for it, talking about how lonely he was and how he longed for a friend and an escape from the abuse he suffered at the hands of the Horde, only for Bo to basically use him for what he wanted and then drop him as soon as he got it. Then there's Spinnerella and Natasa, who have been actively participating in the rebellion despite the fact that no one seems to like them, and Bo is constantly being rude to them for no explained reason. So why was he so amicable with Adora, yet totally dismisses others? Then there's the rest of the Princess Alliance, who for the most part pretty much just fall into archetypes. Perfuma is the hippie princess with an alternative lifestyle. Mermista is the princess with attitude. Seahawk is basically just a goofball. Ultimately, what do we really know about characters like Mermista? It didn't help that the episode that was supposed to focus on her wasted so much time with Seahawk's antics and didn't actually introduce her until halfway through the runtime. And after all that build-up, we find out that she's apparently so lax as a leader that her people were forced to flee for their lives, abandoning their home and their princess. Apparently even her own father left. And the whole time, the only thing that Mermista says about the situation is that she's handling it, but we aren't shown how she was handling it, and ultimately it was Adora who fixed the problem. Natasa and Spinnerella really got the short end of the stick in this season, to the point where I feel like if they had just not been in this season at all, nothing would have actually changed. I really hope that they get more to do in the second season and that we can actually really meet them and get a feel for their characters. Right now, all we really know about them is their base powers and that they're in a relationship. That wasn't even really made obvious until episode 13. I know they went to prom together, but Glimmer and Adora did too. They just went as friends. There was a lot of marketing around these two characters, and a lot of praise for the representation that they brought to the show. And I know people want representation, but they weren't even characters. They didn't get the chance to do anything. They barely got any moments. The biggest moment they had was just a joke about their names, specifically Natasa. With so much marketing around these two characters, they really should have had a bigger role, but it honestly feels like they were only included to get high fives from the media. Frosta actually had one of the more interesting personal issues in the show, being so young and desperate to prove herself as a competent leader when she was worried that everyone wouldn't take her seriously because of her age, only to pretty much prove those concerns were justified when she was foolish enough to ignore Adora's warnings and to invite known and unapologetic terrorists to her prom. She really should have known better than to invite warring nations to the ball, but she was too concerned with her own image than to really think about the situation. That being said, I'm worried that they're going to sweep Frosta's actions in episode 8 under the rug in season 2. This whole experience could be a great learning opportunity for Frosta to grow as a character, so I really hope they don't ignore it. The villains in this show really need more development too. I hope this isn't the last we've seen of Shadow Weaver, and I don't think it is, but a lot of Shadow Weaver in the first season was dedicated to Catra's development, and she didn't get to be enough of a character in her own right. We got some glimpses of Shadow Weaver's past in episode 7, but there was a lot that was missing. It would have been cool to find out that she and Castaspella knew each other, and maybe she even knew Micah, which could connect her to Glimmer. There's a lot of possibility for this character, and it would be great to see them take those opportunities, especially since Shadow Weaver was a really interesting character in the original. It'd be great to see this character get the respect she deserves, and not just be there for another character's development. Then there's Hordak, and I'd really like to see Hordak be a better leader. He's supposed to be the big bad, but a lot of the time he doesn't even know what his subordinates are doing. It kind of feels like he's mostly there to advance Catra's character. It'd be great to see him step up and be the conqueror of Etheria that we know he's meant to be. Maybe it would have been better if they had held off with Hordak and just kept him as the mysterious big bad of the show, since I don't know if we're gonna see Horde Prime be introduced, because for the most part, Hordak came off as a very incompetent leader. His first major appearance in the show had him promote Catra literally because she was there, despite the fact that he didn't know her or how capable she was, and his second in command was complaining about how she just came back from a failed mission that she was leading, but instead he still promotes her to Force Captain like he just can't be bothered with this. The original Hordak would constantly punish his subordinates for failure, and sometimes just because he could. Meanwhile, this guy doesn't seem to understand the threat of a deserter. I think Scorpia could be a really interesting character for world building. She says that her family was not well liked before the Horde came, and when they did come, they just went with it and gave them the Black Garnet, which was probably a really important step for the Horde in taking over Etheria. It would be really interesting to see the other princesses actually talk about Scorpia, or talk to Scorpia, since in the first season, the only scenes they had together were them fighting. At Princess Prom, no one seemed to even care that Scorpia and Catra were there, so it's a little strange that she says that she wasn't well liked and her family wasn't well liked, but everyone was totally fine with them being at Princess Prom. It would have been interesting to see people saying, oh, of course Scorpia and her family let Hordak and the Horde just waltz right into Etheria. They could actually show us that people don't like her, and maybe she could get development too. She didn't seem like she was was totally on board with the plan in episode 13, and it would be nice to see that explored. She's in this weird situation where she's going along with the Horde, maybe because her family feels like the rest of Etheria just abandoned them, but she's not really a bad person either. So she's in a weird spot, and that could be really interesting to explore. Also, maybe get rid of the forced hugging, that'd be great. She can be a bubbly character and a hugger without forcing hugs. There's a lot of potential with Entrapta. Her main conflict in the later episodes of the season is that she feels betrayed by the Princess Alliance because of the misunderstanding they had, where she thinks that they abandoned her, but in reality they just thought she died, and they're all really heartbroken and torn up about it. So maybe she could come across the monument that Perfuma made to her in her kingdom and realize that she wasn't abandoned, it was just a misunderstanding. But after reconnecting with the Princess Alliance, she's already bonded with Catra and Scorpia, then she could be caught between the conflict of both groups that she sees as her friends, pretty much trying to wipe each other out. So hopefully they'll explore that in the second season. Also, it'd be great to see Drill again, or at least get confirmation about it maybe being under Horde control now. I hope that Entrapta doesn't just forget about Drill. We spent a whole episode with the kitchen staff. You can't not mention Drill again. The war is supposed to be the main conflict of the show, but a lot of the time it takes a backseat to some kind of drama. The Horde really needs to step up and be more consistent. In episode 4, they were defeated by unarmed hippies, but in episode 13, they were actually competent enough to capture She-Ra. It seems like the power and capabilities in the show fluctuate depending on how intense they want these scenes to be, rather than the actual abilities of the characters and forces involved. It's not just the Horde's army. For example, in episode 7, Shadow Weaver was able to single-handedly take out a room full of powerful sorcerers, along with Bow and Glimmer, but then she gets taken out by one punch from Glimmer in episode 9. She went down too easily, especially given that Glimmer had been tortured and her powers were thrown out of balance, yet she was still able to take down such a powerful foe so easily. Then there's episode 11, where Catra and Adora are both shown tearing apart those robot spiders with their bare hands, despite the fact that they had come off as such powerful enemies that you probably shouldn't be able to just punch through. Even with Catra and Adora's abilities, it would make sense for a character like She-Ra, but not really Adora. The show is just so inconsistent with how powerful these enemies and characters are, and I really hope they fix that in season 2, because overall everything just feels so convenient for the plot rather than actually considering what everyone's capable of. I really hope season 2 is more consistent than season 1 was. So many things in season 1 were really messy. Characters were off-model a lot, especially Glimmer. Not even just in episode 4, when she changed outfits. It's like they struggled to draw these characters from different angles, so they just end up changing from scene to scene and moment to moment. Characters' heights change, and there's just not a lot of consistency. Also, She-Ra is never actually portrayed as 8 feet tall. I honestly don't think the artists and writers really understand how big that actually is. The tallest character seems to be Scorpia, and honestly, She-Ra never actually rivals her height. The tallest She-Ra ever appears to be is about the height of an adult character. So we're told that she's supposed to be massive, but we're never shown that. There's problems where sometimes She-Ra just doesn't have her sword even though she really should. Also, the sword changes size just randomly when it's on her back. Sometimes it looks really small, and sometimes it looks pretty big. I really hope that these problems are fixed in season 2, because these inconsistencies are really distracting, and it really detracts from the art style, which already has a lot of issues. For example, they rarely ever use shading in the show for the characters. They have this weird shadow on their faces, but other than that, there's no shading for most of the episodes. There are only a few shots that actually have proper shading, and those are the shots that look the best. Hopefully we'll see more shading in season 2. It would really help. The backgrounds in the show also fluctuate in quality. Some of the scenes scenery looks really nice, while others just look really bland, uninspired, and just not good in general. For example, Bright Moon is actually pretty lovely. It has bright colors and an overall nice design, but oftentimes the characters look out of place against the backdrops because they don't have any shading on them, and it causes them to stand out in a jarring way. And while Bright Moon looks nice, some of the other kingdoms just don't look good at all, like Selenius and Drill. I think that the artists could really benefit from using color theory in a better way. In these locations, the colors end up blending together and looking really muddied. The buildings of Selenius are made to look like shells, but they're this very muddy purple color, and it's very similar to the color of the sky. And they use a very similar color palette for Drill, so they don't stand out from each other much. There are a lot of colors that they could have used for Selenius if they had gone with more beachy colors and made it look more like an island paradise instead of these muddy purple shells. It could have actually been a really nice place to look at. It's kind of strange that they went with a completely different color scheme for Mermista's throne room, but outside all the buildings just blend together. Makes it feel like it's not very cohesive. Most of these locations look like they're the bare minimum, rather than there was any kind of inspiration into these locations. Drill doesn't stand out very much. All these locations use a lot of the same colors. The kitchen just has an oven in it, maybe some food supplies, a cabinet. It could look more industrial. Their princess is an inventor, so it would be interesting if the castle reflected that, even places like the kitchen. Instead, she builds the castle as a labyrinth, but we never get an explanation as to why, or why it is that she can't navigate it without a map, even though she's the one who designed it. It seems like Entrapta just does things because she can, with no concern for the consequences of her actions. Overall, the show has some good ideas and concepts. It's just that it doesn't have a good focus on things. The pacing is pretty bad because oftentimes episodes will waste a lot of time on things that are pretty trivial, like episode 5 and 10 had this problem. Plus they'll drag out jokes way past their welcome, and a lot of the story elements feel rushed. I'd also really appreciate it if they actually pulled from the original more. The crew has admitted that they didn't watch the original show and that this one's meant to be more of a spiritual successor, and to be honest, even that's a stretch. But if that's the direction they want to go with, then it would really help them to focus more on plot progression and character development and world building, rather than spending so much time on jokes. Our criticism is meant to be constructive, even if it's a little sassy. But really, we're fans of the original He-Man and She-Ra, and it's been a while since we've seen them, and then it was announced that She-Ra was getting a reboot, and honestly, we feel like they could use a reboot, or just a continuation of the 2002 series. But then, a lot of the marketing felt very passive-aggressive, and they didn't seem to have a lot of nice things to say about the original cast and crew and fans of the original. And it also felt pretty braggy, and we just felt like what we were seeing of the show in the trailers and the character designs and all of these articles, it didn't seem like it was really living up to the hype. So it was kind of frustrating, admittedly. We just think the show could benefit from going in a different direction. It portrays a lot of toxic behavior and relationships to the point where I worry when people say the show has strong role models for children, because it could really do a better job at calling out the bad behavior and properly addressing the flaws of the characters. I'd also think it'd be nice to see the lizard from episode 4 come back too. It was probably just meant to be a one-off joke, but given what we know about Swiftwind, he probably also has a connection to Adora, and he could be a really cute side character. But what do you guys think? What do you want to see in season 2? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you liked this video and want to see more content from us, feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye guys! Bye everyone!